Hi, welcome back to Finding Shakti, conversations to inspire and to inform. And this is our second episode. I'm Kim Bushore-Maki, the host, and I'm happy to introduce Kim Harris from Charlotte, North Carolina. She and I had this wonderful connection about, I don't know, 5-6 weeks ago. And you know how like when you meet somebody and you know that is meant to happen, as kismet, and you're going to keep the conversation going and become good friends. That's immediately how I felt when I met Kim. She is the owner and founder of Artfully Healed, and I'll let her tell you more about that. But for right now, let me just introduce Kim to you. And Kim, thank you so much for being my second guinea pig.
I'm so excited. I'm excited that first of all, get to be second, so that's good. And that you are just following your intuition and just letting this kind of grow and be birthed out into the universe. So that's completely awesome. So congratulations.
Thank you. The impetus for this was I know so many cool people and I want to introduce them to a wider audience.
Yeah.
And you definitely made the cool list, Kim.
Ah.
Yeah. So I want to kick it off with this first question. I want to celebrate the gifts and talents that these awesome women I know have. And so that's why I'm going to start with you. What are the gifts and talents that you love to share with your community that you feel like is the reason you were kind of put on this planet?
That is such a loaded question, and it's loaded because I came to it unexpectedly. I've always been known as a giver. I've always been known as someone who's just very generous in spirit. But when I was really able to wrap my arms around it, it was actually meant to be sort of criticism in a way. I was given a review, and my manager at the time, was a very casual conversation, but it was part of a review process. And he said, you're like someone who like is in a boat and you're like, leave no man behind. And the way he described it was that I was in a boat and I was bringing everyone along with me. And from a professional standpoint, he said, it's taking away from kind of some of your main responsibilities. But he says, I'm going to take off my manager hat for a minute. Personally, I would love to have someone like that in my life. Someone who just so freely gives of themselves and sees other people and how they can help them. And that was just the first time I heard it said that way. It was less about the criticism and more of what I could take from that. So I think that my gift that I've always had, but didn't really truly understand, was that I really, really, really don't want to see people hurting and suffering when I have something to share. And I give of myself in that way. The journey, though, is that I had to find myself and what I needed along the way as well, and kind of balance what that looks like. But I definitely see that now as my overall gift. Enneagram score 2, which is helper, truly defines kind of all of what my giftings kind of fall under, I would say.
And what are some of the ways, Kim, that you like to give?
So I love giving inspiration. I love giving support. I love speaking positively to people in my life. I crafty, so I'm always making gifts. And I just think I like showing up for my friends. I like showing up and being present in relationship. And that's kind of, I give of myself, but I think showing up. And one of the harder things I had to understand, and one of the things I've shared with a friend, is that you say you're a friend, but being a friend is even harder. And it's not just saying who's friend, saying who's relation, but actually being in relationship for me. And so I think that's what I truly try to live out in all of my relationships, is being present in those.
How does your organization, Artfully Healed, that was a mouthful for me. How does that highlight your goal of being of service? What's that organization about?
For me, I go back to a time when I felt alone, felt isolated. I have a lot of events that correlate with this, but one particular moment in time, I was really in need, but had no voice to really say what that need was. And someone reached out to me and she said, "Are you okay?" And I was brave enough to say I wasn't. And so Artfully Healed wants to create that community of brave souls that are willing to ask the question, "Are you okay?" And then also act on what that means. But then people feeling safe enough to say, "I'm not okay." And we look to create community around that, create a movement of what Artfully Healed means. My meaning of it, of how my outlets and my wellness and my pursuit to keep me well is very different than yours and other people. But we're looking to start that conversation of what makes us well. And I just think it's more about exposing the myths of being isolated and being talking about the truth of community and family and the power that we have and finding that power. And it's just really just a conversation starter of, "Are you okay?" And being able to take it the next step from that to finding a place for you to feel okay.
And, you know, we're living in a really special time right now where folks are being asked to shelter in place or be safer at home. And so, what are your thoughts on how do people stay connected, feel like they're part of a community, and may not be able to leave their house?
So I think that when you first acknowledge that you're not okay and say something just doesn't feel right, finding something that makes you and brings you to a happy state. So whatever that looks like. For me, it's I create, this is my create outfit, by the way. I'm just joking. No, I put on lipstick for you. But I was creating this morning. I videotaped myself just creating, just I'm doing something for other people, but it makes me happy. But I had to find that. I had to find what made me happy and made me peaceful, and be willing to say, "I'm not okay. I'm going to turn down the distraction of the news or whatever outlet makes me not feel okay." But we're willing to just take a pulse of how do I feel and what are the things that I'm doing currently that make me feel that way that I can decrease and minimize. And if it's other people, if it's other distractions, be brave enough to say, "You know what, I'm going to remove that distraction. I'm going to remove that extra stimulus. I'm going to remove um, extra things in my life as I can." I know that's not possible for every situation, but for me, I was able to directly tie clutter to my peace. I was directly tied to, I have to have a freer environment to create in. And I had to recognize what that looked like so that when I clear my space, I actually am able to feel lighter. I feel actually physically lighter. But I was willing to do that and take that journey of what that was, because what I found on the other side, but it gave me courage to take that journey with other things. And so I would say, if you're at home and you haven't really taken quiet time for yourself, I would start there. Take some time to do something you like to do, whether it's listen to music, read a book, find someone inspirational that you follow. Take something and say, "You know what, I'm going to do 15 minutes for myself." And I think the more that you take time for yourself, the more that feeds that energy of that I'm worthy of taking this journey.
And the other thing I'm hearing you say, Kim, is that there's a link between feeling good and creating.
Well, I think I'm not sure about feeling good and creating, because I think, okay, I'll give you an example. So I was feeling crappy. I was feeling down on myself. I was having really negative, dark thoughts. I was having like really self-defeating thoughts of my worthiness, of my journey, and I was feeling crappy. So I decided to shut everything off. I was going to go to bed, but then I decided to write. So I decided to write out of this enormous frustration that I had. And the more that I wrote, I actually wrote myself a letter, basically, at the end of it, because I encouraged myself by writing how crappy I felt. And the more that I was able to write and express that, the more I could see how enormously blessed I am, and that that situation wasn't as detrimental, negative, self-defeating as I thought, and it actually brought me back to myself. So that's what I would say, being creative out of that frustration is also an outlet.
That creativity becomes a tool to regulate and impact your moods.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I picked up which tools work best for me. Right.
Right. And that sounds like that's at the core of Artfully Healed as well, that you are exploring different creativity tools to support people in their healing.
Right. And I'm using people that are already creative. I create, based on what I know and my skill set, but I know so many other artists and so many other people that are putting things out in the universe that are way more impactful than what I've done. And so my thought is using their story to help other people come up with ways. So it's not just my way. It's not what I do. It's not my writing, but I've met so many artists that are creating from, I tried to commit suicide. I'm dealing with extreme grief. I lost my parents. I was abandoned as a child. So many people are creating out of those needs that I want to tell their stories, but also show that it doesn't have to look a certain way.
There's creativity in how you create and express and heal.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. So, if along those lines, Kim, is there something that there may be multiple things, but is there one in particular that you would be willing to share with us about how you had to do a hard thing, maybe something that was not appreciated by many, if anybody, and what you gained from doing that hard thing?
It was, you turned me on to Brene Brown's podcast, and I've been listening to Glennon Doyle's. I'm still not through all the way, I'm halfway through, but it spoke directly to what I want to share. And it gave me the words to really talk about it. And so one of the hardest things on this journey, and this predates when I really started having this journey, but I found myself having discussions with people, and I would just say the general consensus along the way. So I would say from my early 20s till a few years ago, my relationships were I'm very open, I'm very sharing, and it would open up criticism based on what I shared. And people felt free to openly criticize or share, what I shared back. And it wasn't done necessarily in a hurtful way, but it was hurtful to me. And for years, I took on this mannerism or behavior that I just allowed people to say what they felt or thought. And I would never say anything to, create conflict. And it was something I was just avoiding. I would avoid the conflict of the conversation. And I would just basically I would basically accept what people were sharing with me. And at some point, it bubbled to the surface enough that I had to make a decision to no longer be that person. And the hardest thing was showing up for myself in my personal relationships to say, I'm not really comfortable with what you just shared. And it really hurt me, and I need to have a better understanding. And I didn't know how to do that. So it came across very brash at first. I'm still working on it. It's still a work in progress. But I just decided that I no longer was comfortable accepting whatever people felt like they needed to say to me, because that's basically what I was doing. And I loved when Glennon Doyle was expressing something similar in her podcast. And she wrote about when you are suppressing your voice, it's very awkward on the outside, because you don't want to make it awkward on the outside with other people, but it feels very uncomfortable on the inside. And that's basically where I was. I didn't want to say, I'm not really sure, why you said that, or that I didn't like it, but I didn't want to make it very awkward to say anything back. But I would always walk away uncomfortable on the inside. And I did that for 20 years. and being able to show up for myself in relationships. And a lot of my relationships change. I've lost a couple of relationships, but being able to show up for myself makes me feel good. I'm still working on the tact part, but I know that I'm showing up for myself. So while it was hard, it was something that I needed to do.
And I'm hearing you describe that tension between not wanting to cause conflict on the outside of you, but also noticing the suffering, the conflict on the inside. And it's so fascinating to me when folks make the decision that it's no longer acceptable for me to be the one suffering. Like it feels like a magical moment, when suddenly I'm worth standing up for. My suffering is not acceptable. And I just love that you recognize that moment and were willing to stand up for yourself, even if it meant losing some relationships.
Right. And the thing for me is that I take the barometer of, first of all, is this a relationship that I want to maintain, right? So if it's one that I'm trying to maintain and a relationship that I treasure, it's in my best interest to have that conversation. If it's something that I'm not going to see this person again, or I don't really, their contribution is really not adding any value to what I'm doing, then that's all well and good. It's not worth that effort. But for those that I really truly value the relationships, I have found that I feel better. Like you said, why would I sit and suffer? I feel better. And I feel like I've set the ground rules for how you should feel about treating me. And that's something I gave as a gift to myself.
That's right. Um, that you are teaching people how to treat you. Yeah. So this feels like a natural segue as well. What gives you meaning in your life? Like, or what feels like is your purpose? Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And so I had to come back to a moment when I had a hard time with what I was supposed to do with Artfully Healed and what my contribution would be, because this came about very unexpectedly with the whole creative and the wellness piece. And I wasn't sure what that meant. And I remember when this first came to me, I thought I was supposed to be an art therapist. I really loved that idea. I loved hanging my shingle. I looked at schools. I was excited. And I really just loved the idea of sitting down with people. I've been someone who people feel comfortable talking with. I love supporting people. I love loving on them. And so that's something I felt drawn to as a gift. And when the idea for Artfully Healed was born, initially I tied it to art therapy. And I remember the first time that I shared it with a close friend, someone outside of my mom. And as I was sharing with her what I was being given as the gift of Artfully Healed, she started crying. And she's a friend that I've had for close to 30 years. And she said, I so see that in you. I so see everything about you, and you love to create, and you love loving on people, and you love seeing them well. So in her mind, this was a perfect way to do that. And that really shows me that I've been living authentically in myself, that she could see that what this is just a culmination of everything that I've already brought to the universe. It's just putting it into more of a movement and more visual, and I'm sharing it outside of my tribe and my circle. So I just think that me showing up authentically in the world has just been, this is just another way that that's represented. And wanting people to not be where I was, or if you are where I was, living in a very depressed, functioning depressed. I was working and doing well, but still not happy state. not understanding that there was so much more joy out in the world, and not understanding that you don't have to stay there. If I can give that message to one person, that is worth it for me. And so I keep showing up and looking for that one person.
Mm. I'm so glad you keep showing up. In fact, I think that's why you and I met. And for those of you listening, Kim and I met serendipitously in a bookstore in a town where neither one of us lived. And I had turned to my cousin who was with me and I said, what do you think about this book? And Kim says, well, I'll tell you what I think about this book. And I was like, yes. And then we stayed for at least another 30 minutes talking. So Kim, I'm moving into this last section of the interview where I give you a lightning round of questions. So the hope is that you just go with whatever's coming up and through. I don't want you to overthink this. So the first question is, what do you love about being a woman?
I think that as women, unfortunately, I'm sorry, this is just unfortunate, but we are allowed to be whatever we want to be, as expressive, as loud, as quiet, as, creative, without abandon. We are allowed to do that. It's fully acceptable. People might talk about us, but it's just acceptable to see that one wild, crazy person, or she's the quiet one. And it's kind of like, that's who she is, and that's okay. And I think that we just get permission, whether we take it or not, to kind of change and evolve. If I decide to evolve at 52, it's perfectly like, oh, she's evolved, she's doing something different. It's not really, I can walk in and just be whoever I want to be. And if next week I want to put on a wig and it be red, and I can just be that I don't have to explain it. I don't have to justify it. People may say, what is she doing now? But we can just change it up at the flip, and no one really, they will talk about us and they may wonder, but it's fully acceptable and people will adapt to it. And I don't think that anyone else has that ability or the permission to do that. And so.
Yeah. What is one thing that people typically don't know about you?
Well, I've only shared this to a couple people. So this is something people widely don't know, but I've probably written close to 1,000 stories in my head. So from my early 20s, when I first started living by myself, I had a hard time sleeping. Something I've struggled with insomnia. So in order to sleep, I used to love stories. I used to love All My Children and One Life to Live and General Hospital. Those were my favorites. But motherhood brought on, there was no more stories. There was no more time for stories. There was no more time for other realities than my own. And so I took to my imagination to write stories as a way of shutting out the world and putting me in a focused universe. And so I've written, I don't know, thousands of stories over the years where I just pick up and continue the story every night. So every night I go to bed, sometimes I go back and think of a story and how I would rewrite it based on learnings that I've had over the years. But I would love someday to be able to share some of these stories. And another thing that I also do that people don't know necessarily is that I've written hundreds of songs in my sleep. And they're full songs, words, melody. I can't sing. I actually tease people that I'm gonna start a group and call it Between the Keys, because that's kind of where I sing in between. And I don't necessarily play an instrument other than my flute. So I'm thinking about taking out the piano so that if I'm working on this inner work, maybe these songs will surface one day. But I wake up and I think I have the melody remembered. I've recorded a few on my phone just to kind of recall the melody or recall the words, but I haven't yet tapped into that yet. So I'm eagerly awaiting for that to manifest. But I know when it does, it's going to be amazing. But I don't share that very often.
Oh my God. I would like to pop your head open and just hear your stories and listen to your songs. What are you reading right now, Kim?
So this is the book that you were asking about that I was reading. I'm still reading. I hope to finish sometime before we break, but it's the Art of Gathering. And I wanted to share, and it's how we meet and why it matters. And that for me, when I first of all, the cover grabbed my attention as an artist and someone who loves color. It's just very beautiful, and which is why I walked over to where we met. It was the book that drew me over there, because I was thinking if that book is over there, then there must be other jewels that I should be able to get. And so that's why I was standing there when we met. And of course, when you touched the book, I was just like, oh my goodness, she's touching that book. It's amazing. But I was on a plane when I first popped it open, and I wrote in my book, there was a sentence, it's called this is chapter 1, decide why we're really gathering, which I thought was really important. It's Artfully Healed, as we eventually will meet. I just wanted to be very clear on why we're meeting. And I didn't know a book like this existed, but the sentence that I highlighted was, we gather because we need one another. And that's the basis of why we gather in general, because we need one another. And I wrote in there, this right here is everything, is what I wrote on the book. So I'm going to finish the book. I'll report back.
I well, if it wasn't for that book, we wouldn't have met. So it's a
Yes.
special book. What is your favorite podcast right now?
So I just started listening to Brene Brown, which is one you turned me on to. I heard it like 3 more times after you shared it. But there was another one by Kathy Heller called "Don't Keep Your Day Job," and that was the one that I really loved, the entrepreneurial spirit, and not just entrepreneurs, but people in general that don't look at their current circumstances as a barrier to what could become, and being able to move past fear, lack, mindset, to actually birth something from nothing. And hearing that over and over and over gives you courage to say, why not? And as someone who just launched and someone who's still building, hearing that message from other people like me, other people that are in your careers, other people that could just basically say, no one else is doing that, doesn't sound right. But being willing to say, no one else is doing that, but why not me? Um, is really encouraging. And so I like the podcast. I like hearing people that found a way to break through their own mental struggle, and sometimes financial, sometimes resources struggle. And hearing that gives me enough courage to just keep showing up every day, no matter what it looks like.
So, what music are you listening to right now?
So I love music. I'm a band nerd. It's funny because my sister posted this thing on Facebook today about our high school band, and I literally thought that she was helping advertise an alumni band, because I have this a vision that we're going to be able to come back at some point and all play our instruments, and we're going to have this adult marching band thing. And I had shared that on Facebook a couple of weeks ago. And so when I first saw the post, I thought, oh my goodness, my high school is starting an alumni band. Well, no, they're not. They are they're just promoting this coming class, the band, and it was just a post about that. So I was slightly disappointed, but it goes back to my love of music and all different kinds of music. And so I will say that my go-to right now, my fallback right now for getting me up and moving, and I don't know why, but it's still Hamilton soundtrack. I heard it last year. I saw it last year. And I have to play it from beginning to end. I can't like play it in the middle or put it on shuffle. I have to start at the very first track and play it all the way through. And I just love all things Hamilton. I would absolutely pay to see it at full price again. And I can't wait for it to start touring again so I can go back and see it. So I love it.
And then the last question, what does freedom mean to you?
Freedom means to me the ability to do the things that matter to me. And so freedom means to me when I see myself back in Greece, that I will get back to soon, and being able to live and work my businesses from the comfort of the beachside and looking at the water, that is freedom to me. And not have a care about who cares or whose opinion or why it matters to other people, but being able to just be and exist in my own self and how that represents outward. I can't wait for that freedom, and that's something that I'm working toward actively.
Kim Harris, thank you so much for being the second guest on Finding Shakti. And I'm gonna, folks, I want you to know that all the music and podcasts and books that Kim mentioned, it will be in the show notes, as well as where you can find her. And Kim, can you just speak a little bit about, if people want to get in touch with you or learn more about your business, how to do that?
Absolutely. On Instagram, we are I Am Artfully Healed. On Facebook, we are Artfully Healed. And our website is artfullyhealed.org. And you can find me there on all three. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. But I would love for you to be part of the movement. If you feel that you have something you wanted to share, I would love to hear it. So that's where I'm at. That's where I am.
Thank you, Kim. And I'm happy to introduce you to this community. It's a great group of people, and I can't wait for you all to connect. And remember, you can find all these episodes on shaktiinthemountains.com, as well as our social media sites. I'm Kim Bushore-Maki, and I hope you're having a good day.